Let's get ready for a feel-good stretchy class. We'll start in child's pose. And if child's pose isn't a feel-good pose for you, you can choose another pose, like perhaps lying on your belly in crocodile pose with your palms or your forearms stacked, or lying on your back in Shavasana. And we'll be here for just about 5 breaths to settle in. Notice when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out. Notice the places that move in your body. And the expansion in your belly and your rib cage on the inhale. And just that easy settling in on the exhale. Find a breath that is easy and comfortable for you, where your inhale and exhale are even in length. If possible, breathe in and out through your nose. And let's enjoy 3 more breaths here together. On your next inhale, lift your forehead away from the ground, and we'll come to a kneeling position. Meet up there. So our first stretch is for the soles of our feet. This is a yin-style toe stretch. So we will tuck our toes under and sit back on our heels. Now you can have your legs and feet together, or you can have them separate, but make sure that your heels and your knees are in line. So if your knees are apart, you don't want your heels dropping in. You can make this less intense by sitting on a block, probably at its highest height, and you can squeeze that block right between your feet. You can also de-intensify by resting your hands on blocks in front of you. The more you're right over the balls of your feet, the more intense it will be. Get as many of your toes to tuck under as possible. Now, my little toes, because of how my feet are shaped, they're never going to tuck under, and that's okay. Just get as many as you can to tuck. And we'll be here for a minute, breathing. If your legs are together, squeeze your heels and your thighs toward each other. If you're sitting on a block, hug the block with your heels. Try to find that same steady breath that you had in child's pose. Now I know you might be thinking, wait a minute, this is supposed to be the feel-good class. Well, this is one of those poses where the feel-good part might come more after, but from here, we'll do some more poses that might feel a little better when you're in them. This is really good if you're a runner. It's really good after all of that jumping that we did. We're just here for about 10 more seconds, a few more breaths. If you've closed your eyes, blink your eyes open. And if you're upright, shift your weight forward so your hands come to blocks or the ground. And then slowly untuck your toes. Now there's the feel-good part, right? We'll come to hands and knees. And I often like, after I do that one, to gently pound out the tops of my feet on my mat. And then we'll slide our knees back, tuck our toes again, but this time to come into a downward dog with bent knees. And go for a little walk in place in your downward dog. Perhaps glance up at your hands, make sure they're where you want them to be. Index or middle fingers forward, fingers spread evenly. And then gaze back toward your feet or legs. And inhale, lift your heels high. Keep your heels and hips lifted, and exhale, bend your knees so your spine gets really long. Inhale here, and as you exhale, pivot your heels to the left and your toes to the right. You can have your knees quite a bit bent here, or you can straighten your legs a little if that feels good. But our aim is to find a side stretch through the right side of our body. You can enhance that by drawing your right outer hip back. And you might notice that your right hand gets kind of light on your mat, which is fine. Soften your face, your jaw. Take one more breath here. And then inhale back to center to your bent knee down dog. Exhale, pivot your heels to the right, your toes to the left to find a side stretch through your left side. Draw your left outer hip back. Soften your face and your jaw. Notice if your left hand feels a little lighter. One more breath. And inhale back to center. Lift your right leg high behind you. And then we're going to step our right foot forward. So you can come onto your right fingertips. You can pick up your right hand. Take as many steps as you need to get there. And then walk both of your hands to the inside of your right foot. You can walk your right foot a little wider too. You're welcome to keep your back knee lifted in lizard. You're also welcome to lower your back knee down. Toes tucked or pointed, whatever feels better in your body. You can keep your right toes pointing forward, or you can turn your foot out. Either way, make sure your knee and your toes are pointing in the same direction. We'll be here for about 90 seconds. You can stay up on your hands, lower your forearms to the floor, or you can rest your forearms on blocks. And settle into what feels like a feel-good stretch for you. Feel free to move around a little to get comfortable, but once you're comfortable, see if you can stay and be with the pose, be with your breath. Some people like to roll onto the pinky edge of the front foot here too. Totally great option. Again, just make sure knee and toe are pointing in the same direction. Knee and toes. Lengthen through your spine. About 30 more seconds here. Depending on what's sore or tight today, you might feel a stretch in your outer hip, your inner thighs, your hamstrings, your quads. Let's enjoy 3 more breaths. And then if you're on your forearms, start to walk yourself back up. Heel toe your right foot back to the center of your mat. So you find your classic lunge. And then we'll transition back into downward facing dog. It can be interesting to notice if one side feels different than the other side here. We'll step our left foot forward. You can come onto your fingertips. You can even step your foot just right outside your hand from the get-go. That feels smoothest to you. Doesn't really matter how you get there. Find a route that works. And back knee can be lifted or down. Toes turned out or forward. Probably whatever variation you did on the other side. That's going to be the one you want to go for on this side. And we'll settle in for about 90 seconds. And if at any point this doesn't feel comfortable for you, if it doesn't feel good in your body, adjust, move around, come out of the pose. Or if at any time you feel like you want to go a little deeper, like you want to take blocks out from under your forearms, if they're under your forearms, then go for it. But again, once you find that feel-good stretch, see if you can stay there. When I have my back knee down and my back foot pointed, as it is now, one thing that I really like to work with here is reaching back through the big toe side of my foot. Not only does that help me to keep my foot and ankle straight, but it also, I find, brings even more of a subtle stretch into the hip flexor on my right side. Of course, my hip flexors do tend to be pretty tight, so I would probably feel them no matter what. Soften your face and your jaw. We'll be here for a few more breaths. And then on an inhale, if you're down on your forearms, start to walk your hands upright again. Scoot your front foot towards center, and we'll transition back into a downward facing dog. One more time, pausing to feel, to notice. And then on an inhale, let's come forward to a plank. We're not going to stay here. Don't worry. Lower your knees, point your toes, and then lower down to your belly. This next one is maybe one of my favorite stretches, if not my very favorite stretch. Let's stretch our right arm forward and walk it over to the left a little bit. And then you'll cross your left arm over your right and reach your left arm forward. And you can start to walk your left hand over to the right, so you can have more of an X shape, or you can have less of an X shape. And take your time working into what's a feel-good stretch for you. If it feels good to turn your palms up, turn your palms up. And the tricky part here can sometimes be figuring out what to do with your head. Some people like to hook their chin over. For me, that doesn't feel very good for my neck, so I kind of tuck my chin in. If you want to deepen the feeling of stretch, you could also scooch forward just a little bit and maybe slide your hands a little further apart. And then settle into your breath. If you're familiar with eagle pose, this is a very similar stretch to the arms in eagle pose, only you're lying on your belly. You don't have to balance on one foot. Isn't that great? This is an especially good one to do after you do a lot of upper body work. So after we do our next upper body flow, upper body drills next week, this might be a good one to visit after. Stay for about 2 more breaths. And then we'll slide our arms apart. How'd that feel? Good? We'll move on to the other side. So this time you'll stretch your left arm, cross to the right side of your mat, and cross your right arm over your left. And I'll demonstrate a less intense version on this side. But if you like, you can continue to creep your right hand over to the left, palms up or palms down. And rest your head in whatever position feels good for your body. And again, we'll be here for about 90 seconds. Just like with eagle pose, you'll likely feel a stretch in your upper back. Soften your face and your jaw. Notice the places in your body that move as you breathe here. Maybe notice if this side feels markedly different than the other side in any way. That's not good or bad, it's just interesting information for you to have for your practice. Let's find 3 more breaths here. And then start to slide your arms apart. And we'll press back to a child's pose. And then from here, we'll move on to our backs. You may want to have a block with you, not required, but it can be kind of nice. And if you do, that block will be to your left side. So we'll lie on our backs. And we'll cross our right leg over the left. And it's just like you would sit with your legs crossed if you were sitting in a chair. Stretch your arms out to a T or make goalposts. And scoot your hips to the right. You can tuck your right toes behind your left calf like eagle if you like, if that feels good, or let your toes hang. And we'll drop our knees over to the left. And the reason why you might want that block there is you might want the block to go underneath your right knee. If your right knee easily drops to the floor, having a block there is a good idea because it keeps your knee and your hip level, and you can get sometimes a little bit better twist, a little bit better stretch through your hip flexors that way. You can look up or turn your head to the right if you like. I really like in this twist to bring my left hand to the top of my right knee, so right to my right kneecap, and to press my right knee into my left hand. I find that brings a little bit more stretch into the right side of my belly here, to my right hip flexor. And if that made 0 sense, that's totally okay. You just rest and enjoy the twist. So you're twisting here, your belly to the right, twisting away from your knees, in the opposite direction of your knees. And then see if you can allow the backs of your shoulders to settle into the support of the floor. We'll take 3 more breaths here. On an inhale, untwist. Bring everything back to center. If you are using a block, you'll move the block over to your right side. Scoot your hips back to center. Cross your left thigh over your right. And then drop your knees over to your right as well. Again, a block can help your knee and your hip to stay a little more level. Settle your shoulder blades into the floor beneath you. Find a comfortable position for your arms. And if you turned your head on the other side, perhaps you might turn your head on this side as well. Turn your head to the left, away from your knees, as you twist your belly away from your knees. And you might find it useful to bring your right hand on top of your left kneecap and to press your knee into your hand as you twist your belly to the left. And what that does is it brings the stretch a little bit more into your hip flexors sometimes, which, as I mentioned earlier, my hip flexors are a little on the tighter side, so I like that extra little stretch. Let's find 3 more breaths here. And then on an inhale, bring everything back to center. Scoot your pelvis back to center. And hug your knees into your chest. Separate your knees as wide as your armpits. If you like, you can show the bottoms of your feet to the ceiling and find happy baby pose, holding onto your shins, your pant legs, if you have pants on right now, the pinky edges of your feet. You can feel free to move around in your happy baby, or to enjoy a still stretch. And then when you're ready for a Shavasana awaits you. If you like, you might bring your feet together for a Supta Baddha Konasana, or a butterfly on your back. And if you happen to have blocks, you could support your knees with blocks, either flat, or some people like them at an angle. I kind of like that today. I also like to bring my hands behind my head in Shavasana, give the weight of my head to my hands so I can lengthen the back of my neck as I set my head back down. Close your eyes if it's comfortable to do so. And soften your belly so that it's free to move as you breathe. Just so there's nothing hindering the natural movement of your breath. Let your breath move however it wants to here. Know that you are, of course, welcome to remain in Shavasana for as long as you like or as long as you're able to today. And thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you back tomorrow for another lower body strength flow.